Welcome to our /malicious compliance, where OP gets his bully expelled. Our next Reddit post is from Emotional Sector. Some context. From 2001 to 2010, I went to a truly vile Catholic school that was part of our local church that we attended. The students and staff were homophobic, racist, and xenophobic, and me, being a goth Latinx student, I was bullied by students and staff alike. This school had a pretty strict dress code requiring students to wear a uniform, and the boys had to tuck in their shirts and wear a belt. This was a problem for me because the staff and students would love to hit me with a 1-2 punch, where the students would steal my belt during gym class and the teachers would conveniently do a belt check, and this would result in me getting countless detentions. It was hard to prove that this was happening because having an extra belt in your locker wasn't suspicious, and we never labeled our belts because who steals belts? Anyway, after my parents caught wind of what was happening, they immediately scheduled a meeting with the principal, vice principal, and the pastor of the church. In my parents' defense, they didn't know how awful the school was. And after learning about the racist and homophobic views of the Catholic Church, we promptly left and joined a much more accepting church. My dad said, "So, it's come to my attention that my son keeps getting detention for dress code violations caused by other students stealing his belt." The principal said, "Well, we actually have no evidence to prove this, and we just suspect that your son isn't wearing a belt as a way to rebel." I said, "I absolutely do wear a belt every single day." The pastor said, "God requires us to take responsibility for our shortcomings, and we shouldn't blame others for our shortcomings. Well, regardless of the reason, your son needs to wear a belt, and failure to do so from this point forward will result in more drastic consequences." Before my dad can say another word, my mom thanks the three of them for their time and asks for a printed copy of the dress code. And on her way out, she says to me, "Let's buy you a belt that none of those racists or homophobes would ever want to be caught with." So, on to the malicious compliance. The next day, I walk into school wearing a rainbow sequin belt that had the words "Gay Pride" in all caps. I had recently come out as bi, so my mom wanted me to be proud of it and bought a series of belts to help me express myself. I was immediately called into the principal's office, and I was given a lecture on the sanctity of marriage and whatnot. To be honest, I wasn't listening. After she finished her tirade, I handed her a letter that my mom told me to give her when I was inevitably going to be called into the office to be reprimanded. Just like every other day, my belt was stolen at lunch, and when the teacher tried to get me in trouble, I asked her politely to check the lockers of my classmates. Upon doing so, she found my rainbow sequin belt in the locker of one of the bullies and asked him where he got this belt from. And instead of lying and saying that it was his, he didn't want to be labeled as being gay because he was homophobic, so he admitted to stealing it. At this point, I had him dead to rights, and I politely asked him for all my belts back or compensation for them. His parents ended up having to write us a check because the dummy admitted to throwing all of them away. And because the school kept a log for each belt-related infraction, I could prove that he had stolen over 20 belts. That student was expelled for breaking one of the 10 Commandments, and the pastor himself was forced to apologize to me. I left shortly after that, and I went to a school that accepted me for me, and I made tons of lifelong friends. Our next Reddit post is from DMGT. When I was in college, I took a class with this gem of a professor. On the first day of class, he asked how many people thought they would make an A. This being a tough engineering school where a C grade actually was average, something like 5 students out of a class of 60 raised their hands. He then announced that that's how many A's he would give out that semester. All of our tests for that class were multiple choice exams we took online. We were allowed to refer to our notes during the tests, and we were allowed to study from old tests as long as we didn't refer to the old test during the exam. Fair enough. I studied for the first test, but I didn't have access to any old exams, so I did fine, but not great. By the time the second exam rolled around, I'd made a friend who was in a frat that had multiple copies of old exams from this professor. We and a couple other students took advantage of the rule allowing us to study from old tests. We quickly discovered that on these 50-question tests, the professor had a repertoire of about 75 questions he pulled from. On the first copy of the test that we studied from, we took the time to work through the answers to make sure that we understood them. By the time we got to the fourth copy, we could answer questions before we even finished reading them. Exam time rolls around, and just as with previous years, he pulled from the same pile of questions. I think it took me 12 minutes to answer everything correctly. In hindsight, I probably should have let the clock run for a bit. We had an hour. But I went ahead and submitted the test because I had other things to do. I checked in with the other students that I'd studied with the next day, and they'd all gotten over 90%. Sweet, I'm definitely using that plan for the third test in the final. The next day, we all received an email from the professor letting us know that we were being reported to the dean for an honor code violation. He claimed that he had never had anyone make better than an 80% on one of his tests before. So the fact that we all made over 90% was clear proof in his mind that we'd cheated. This being an engineering school, we were all nerds who were pretty scared about receiving such an email. But we agreed the best course of action was to talk to the professor before we went to the dean so we could tell him our side of the story and see if we could work things out. We reached out to him, and he agreed to meet with us after class. When we met with him and laid out our case, he was surprisingly receptive to our explanation. I think in reality, he just didn't want to go through with the hassle of reporting us to the dean. So we left the meeting feeling pretty good, and we agreed within our study group that we would keep studying from the old tests. Well, about a week before test 3, this guy announces to the class that because some of us had found the previous test so easy, the next one would have twice as many questions in the same amount of time. Being the cheeky SOB that I am, I asked him as I was leaving class what would happen if someone made 100 on the test. He said, "God help you on the final." So we used the same approach in studying for that test, and we found the same pattern of a limited set of questions. Of course, in addition to the extra questions he had promised, all the questions on this test would be new. So while we still memorized all his questions and answers, we tried to make sure that we understood the concepts as much as possible so we could deal with those extra questions. Test day comes around, and lo and behold, 87 of the questions are pulled directly from old tests. 10 questions were from a guest lecture where he basically pulled the questions and answers directly from the slides. And 3 were filler questions like, what's 1 plus 1? And true or false, the earth revolves around the sun. I knew that I had everything right. I also knew that I didn't want to screw myself and everyone else for the final. I purposely answered the filler questions incorrectly, so if he looked at the results, he would know what I'd done. I got a 97. I never heard from that professor about the third test, but I like to think of him rage scrolling through the results. I don't remember details about the final, but I do remember the format being the same as what had been announced at the beginning of the semester. My study group also worked together on a group project where we all made A's, so if he really only gave out 5 A's that semester, we received them all. I've never understood why there are professors out there who seem proud of the fact that most of their students don't get an A. If most of your students are struggling with the coursework, then doesn't that mean that you're a terrible teacher? Our next Reddit post is from Cat Dad Millhouse. This happened over 15 years ago when digital SLR cameras were first becoming somewhat affordable to anyone who wasn't either wealthy or a professional photographer. I was in high school and I'd been a budding photographer for years already, working in a small retail photo supply shop. I had a customer who appeared to be in his 60s come in one Saturday and spend over an hour demoing just about every camera we sold. I honestly looked forward to those customers because it made the time go faster, and I generally enjoyed talking shop with people. Eventually, he settled on one that we both thought would suit his needs and I rang him up. A few nights later, he comes back. I've already been given a heads up by the store's owner that the guy has called ahead, and he's pissed. When the customer arrives, he immediately accuses me of selling him a camera that's either broken or simply not good enough for what he wants to use it for. He just wants to use it to take pictures of his grandkids, who, like most tiny children, aren't always standing perfectly still. He says it's too slow, it takes the picture after the kid's already done something, every photo is blurry, etc. I take him at his word and examine the camera, changing some settings and snapping a few pictures as I go. I genuinely can't find anything wrong with it. As gently as I can, I try to tell him that it may be a combination of using the wrong settings on the camera for what he's trying to photograph, and maybe a bit of slow reflexes that will develop with practice. Keep in mind that I'm young and terrified of losing my job, so believe me when I say that I'm as delicate as I can be with the whole situation. But that was the wrong answer, apparently. His solution? Okay, hotshot, let's see you make it work. I'm gonna wave my arms back and forth over my head, and I want you to take pictures when they're straight up. He insists that this will prove the camera is too slow and that it can't take a sharp picture. He hands me the camera, and he starts doing his best, wave your hands in the air like you just don't care, right in the store. Snap, snap, snap. I hand the camera back and let him review the photos, each one showing the exact moment he wanted me to photograph, perfectly sharp and in focus. He didn't say another word. He huffed, hastily shoved everything back into his camera bag, and stormed off. Sorry, sir. I was just doing what you asked me to do. Our next Reddit post is from Little Miss Bunny Woman. This happened a few years ago, right after my really good neighbor moved out and a really terrible family moved in. It was a Saturday and I saw the neighbors working on their backyard. I hadn't really had the opportunity to introduce myself, so I went over and said hello. They were digging a pit to put in a plastic rainwater collection thing so they could water their vegetable garden. Me being nice, I offered to help, and I spent a really nice day digging a pit and laying some cement for the tank to rest on. Well, I noticed two things and tried to bring them up. One, they didn't put any removable mesh through the main collection pipe, meaning that if it got clogged, it was going to be terrible to clean. Two, there was no overflow line from the tank. The thing is, these would have been easy to fix, maybe 45 minutes tops. I tried to bring it up, and I told them they might want to put in some mesh and an overflow. I was shut down right away and told that it was fine. They just said, do it my way. I want it done my way. If you don't like it, leave. So I said, okay, have a nice day, and I left. About a month later, we get heavy rain, and guess what? It filled up. Then the intake pipe filled up. The water collected and then spilled through their basement window, flooding their basement. And I mean seriously flooding it with at least a solid foot of water. So yeah, maybe listen to the girl who went to university for, engineering. They had to pump their basement, dig up the tank, and add an overflow pipe. Since then, they've hated me. Our next Reddit post is from Rando Boomer. This is my fun story about my obnoxious boss. As I mentioned in an earlier post, I used to travel a lot for business, between 30 and 35 weeks a year. Our boss was a frequent traveler as well and taught us the tricks of the trade for accumulating frequent flyer miles. Eventually, he retired and sold the company to the new boss. The new boss overheard that I had over 500,000 frequent flyer miles with my airline and said that he would implement a new policy that we had to use our personal frequent flyer miles for our business travel since the company had paid for our trips. That weekend, my wife and I sat down and booked weekend trips all over the country for the next year. Boston for clam chowder? Check. New York City for a Broadway show? Check. Garlic Fest in Gilroy, California? A real and delicious thing, by the way. Check. By Monday morning, my airline frequent flyer mile account was down to about 15,000 miles. Later that week, it was time to book a work trip, and my boss said that I had to use my frequent flyer miles. I brought up my account and showed him that I didn't have enough miles. He asked where they all went, and when I said that I'd booked some trips, he demanded that I redeposit the miles. I pointed out that there was a $150 charge per person, and since it wasn't policy, I wasn't going to pay for it. Now pissed, my boss announced that going forward, we needed approval for personal use of our frequent flyer miles. Okay, boss, you bet. My next step was to spread my flights over any and every airline I could find to prevent accumulating the 20,000 miles required to redeem a free ticket. I was on United, Frontier, American, Delta, Northwest, Continental, US Air, Southwest, etc. My boss eventually figured out what I was up to, and he lost what little patience remained for me. Then the following conversation took place. I suppose you think you're a smart guy. No, I know I'm a smart guy. Don't get cute. No, I'm smart. Cute is just a bonus. Look, I see my wife about 10 days out of the month. I live out of my suitcase. I know the aircraft evacuation speech by heart. Most of my meals are handed to me through a window. And thanks to my willingness to do this, you make hundreds of thousands of dollars. Can you please just let me keep the only perk that I get from all of this? My boss thought about it for a moment, grunted, "Fine, keep your miles," and walked away. Our next Reddit post is from Leviathan. I bought a laptop from a large Fortune 500 company. Let's call this company Bell Computers. After about 2 years, the hinges on the laptop broke and it was almost but not quite out of warranty. I called the service center and they refused to replace the hinges. I called, got the runaround, and each time they refused to fix it or even send me the parts. At one point, I was speaking with a low-level customer service manager and I told him that I would keep trying to escalate until someone honored the warranty. Then the manager replied, "You can escalate this all the way to the CEO and even he wouldn't help you." Well, it was at that moment that it clicked. See, I used to work for Bell Computer Company. I didn't know the CEO, Mr. Bell, but while I was employed there, he would occasionally send mass emails out to the staff. His email address was just his name, so it was easy to remember. Alright then, let's play. I hung up the phone and drafted an email to Mr. Bell, CEO of Bell Computers, just like the helpful customer service rep said I should do. I wrote in the email about being a former employee, how the runaround with customer service was awful, and how I just wanted the part to fix my laptop. The next day, I got a phone call from Mr. Bell's executive assistant. I spoke with her for about 15 minutes about everything that happened, and she took my info and my computer service number and said that she would forward it to the VP of customer service. I got an email the following day saying the part had shipped. That was r/malicious compliance, and if you like this content, check out my Patreon where I publish extra episodes. Also, hit that subscribe button because I put out new Reddit videos every single day. Welcome to r/entitled parents, where an entitled father tells OP that he's not allowed to cook food in his own home. Our next Reddit post is from Anita Derange. I've written a handful of times about this particular entitled mom. She is notorious for being difficult. She refuses to lift her plate with her own children, claiming she's too weak. She has 5 kids. She won't watch them or really do much. She relies on her family and her poor husband to raise them. She recently went to the doctor and swore that she was diagnosed with complex partial seizures, claiming that she was having seizures every 5 minutes. She said that her brain was essentially rebooting over and over, and that was why she couldn't do anything adult-like. Now, I was skeptical because she had gone to the doctors on her own and her husband didn't know exactly what the doctor said. After weeks of medication, the drama goblin still hasn't cleaned her house, let alone any of the other changes she swore were coming. She just lays in bed and online shops all their money away. This can't be her fault. No, it must be that the medicine isn't working. She goes back to the doctor and they give her this kind of watch-like device to wear for a bit. The device would track her seizures and alert her and them if she had a bad one. The drama goblin is sure that her brain is rebooting, and so there's no way to get her life back together. Instead of trying, she starts hounding her husband to have another baby. That'll fix everything, just like the last 4 did. But her husband doesn't want to do it anymore. He's overwhelmed with everything as it is. She told him that she doesn't care what he wants. I told him to secretly go get his tube snipped. He won't, but he needs to. Pretty soon I'm sure I'll be making a post with the update, Drama Goblin is pregnant. Anyway, on the Drama Goblin's follow-up, her husband goes with her this time. He's concerned because of the things Drama Goblin has done or said. He showed the doctor some video he had of her seizures. The doctor tells the Drama Goblin that according to the device she's wearing, she's not having seizures. Her brain isn't rebooting. That, in her professional opinion, she believes Drama Goblin has some undiagnosed mental illness and referred her to a psychiatrist. She was firm and kind. But the Drama Goblin flipped out and told her that she was having seizures. That this doctor obviously didn't know what she was talking about. The Drama Goblin wanted to speak with the doctor's boss because of how she was speaking to her. The doctor pretty much told her to get a second opinion if she didn't believe her, but really pushed seeing someone and getting diagnosed properly. Drama Goblin is pissed. She refuses to contact any psychiatrist. She made an appointment for another doctor and a lawyer because she's convinced this doctor singled her out because she has a disability and can't do certain things. She drives me mad, but at least she's entertaining. Our next Reddit post is from Yatu Sobs. When I was a preteen, my mom gave me a diary with a tiny lock and a key. I hid the keys and I began using the diary almost immediately. I was a bookworm and I loved reading and writing. I was also quite neglected as a child, so my diary was the only place that I could express myself and feel heard. I'd read my latest entries, and that allowed me to reflect on my own thoughts and actions and learn from my past situations. It was honestly really great for my mental health. For a time, my mood and mental health improved. Time passed. I couldn't tell you how long, probably a few months. Shortly after that, I wrote an entry about my first wet dream. My mom became furious and confronted me, full on screaming. She sat me in the living room as she towered over me, screaming in my face, asking me if I thought this was normal, that I was having depraved thoughts that no child my age should have. Honestly, for a preteen, really, it was actually perfectly normal. She said that when I was 5 years old, I made a promise to have no intercourse before marriage, and this was clearly going against my word. I tried to defend myself at first. I didn't understand how she even knew about it. But she took out my unlocked diary as proof of my depravity, and my attempts to defend myself that it was just a dream fueled her anger even more. I sat there silently, crying, answering quietly whatever she wanted me to say to whatever she asked because nothing else would stop her escalation of screaming. I felt betrayed. My locked diary was the only safe place in that house. I was careful with what I wrote in my diary after that incident, and I set a few tests to check if I was still having my locked diary read without my knowledge or consent. I did this by writing about innocuous incidents in a way that could have sounded like it was more than it was, knowing that it would prompt questions out of curiosity. Every time. It never took more than 2 days for the questions to come out. It turns out she'd hunt for my diary's keys and would read it regularly. Needless to say, I stopped using my diary. My only breathing space had been turned against me. I significantly closed myself off from everyone. I felt that even if my diary could betray me, then certainly other people would too. It was hard not writing. I no longer had an outlet for emotional or psychological relief. But I really couldn't trust anyone anymore. After a week or two without any new entries, Mom asked why I had stopped using my diary. If I had dared, I would have rolled my eyes and asked, "What do you think?" But I knew better than to attract attention to myself, and I simply said that I lost interest. What an absolute garbage can of a parent. Who honestly holds people to promises they made when they were 5? Honestly, there's really only one reason why a 5-year-old would ever make that promise, because an adult told them to make that promise. Our next Reddit post is from Bronze Butterfly. Well, paint my face and call me a clown. I should have known. I really should have known. Backstory. This entitled dad meets the whole checklist when it comes to malignant narcissism. He can do no wrong, no matter what. Everyone else is always wrong, whatever. He has to have the newest thing, the best thing. Nothing else is acceptable. To that end, he bought a brand new 7-seater car 5 years ago. He treated that car better than me, honestly. I was the unfavorite of the family. Even though I tried my best to be useful, nothing was ever good enough. My younger half-siblings, the household help, and my stepmother were allowed to treat me however they wanted. I'd moved to his home country to get to know that side of my heritage, but when it got too bad, I noped out and went straight back to my mom's country. Life has done my entitled dad a bad turn, especially after I left there 3 years ago. He hasn't worked consistently, bills are piling up, and he even had a stroke, which I had to find out via telephone relay, basically. As a result, he's in debt for over $6,000 and is struggling to pay it since he can't work. He also owes property taxes. My sisters both have school debt and he can't afford medication or rehab. Now, despite all this, I spoke to my aunt and she told me that despite him being a dick, she felt a little sorry for him. I didn't like him either, but I said that I would give him $1,500. Give, not loan. Provided that he gave me the baby album that I mistakenly left behind. I was basically offering free money to someone that I was estranged from, just for a small favor. He keeps asking her if I sent the money yet. I hadn't. Then he starts saying to my aunt that he'll send me digitized pictures because the album is not her property. He went on about how I was blackmailing him and how he's not going to stand for it. That I hate him because I won't just send him the money. He said that I don't listen, that I wasn't mistreated, I just made it look that way. And who's gonna believe OP anyway? Imagine being able to clear 1/4 of your debt just by sending a worthless album. Anyone smart would take the quiet shame of the help, as opposed to the very public shame of having your car towed when everyone in your uppity neighborhood is there to see. He could avoid having his name published in the debtor's page of the newspaper. But I guess spite is keeping him alive, not the medication that he can't afford to buy. He says that he's not going to stand for me blackmailing him. Fine, then he can stand for the effing bus after the repo people come and take his stupid car. I'm done. OP, if your father sends you a digital picture of your baby album, then you should send him a digital picture of the money. Our next Reddit post is from Scarlet Absol. Background: my aunt tends to go through cars like you wouldn't believe and had just ruined her 30th car. Yes, 30th. My grandmother, her mother, had offered to give her my late grandfather's car since my grandmother no longer needed 2 cars. But that wasn't good enough for my aunt. She had her eye on an overpriced 7-year-old SUV with a ridiculous amount of miles. And because of her financial situation, she needed someone to co-sign to get a loan for the car. My grandmother, who had lost her husband not even 2 years prior, had no interest in signing for a used car that would probably die before it was even paid off. So at Sunday dinner one week, my aunt asked my father, her younger brother, if he would co-sign for a car loan. My father basically told her, no way. If I co-signed for a car for anyone, it would be for my 16-year-old daughter, OP, not you. Just take Dad's old car. This triggered a major fight between my father and his sister. It ended with my aunt screaming, "If you won't co-sign for my car loan, I'll call Child Protective Services because OP is sleeping on a mattress on the floor." My bed frame had broken not even a week before, so I was sleeping on a box spring and a mattress on the floor until we could get a new bed frame. None of us thought anything about the threads, since my aunt had a habit of making empty threads when she didn't get her way. Until a few days later. I got called down to the guidance office in the middle of a chemistry test for a quote, urgent matter. When I got to the office, I was led into a small room with a school social worker and another woman. The woman then asked me, "Hello, OP, I have a few questions about your living arrangements." She asked me questions like, "What's your home life like? How do your parents treat you? Are you happy at home? Do you have your own room?" etc. It wasn't until she asked, "How do you sleep at night?" did I start to mentally piece things together. So I asked, "What is this about?" The woman hesitated but eventually told me, "We received an anonymous tip that your father is forcing you to sleep on the floor. We want to know what that's about." And that's when everything clicked and I was livid. I told the woman, "I am not being forced to sleep on the floor. My bed frame broke about a week ago, so I'm currently sleeping on a box spring and mattress until my new bed gets delivered." I'll bet you any amount of money that my aunt was the person who made that anonymous tip because my father refused to co-sign for her to get a new car. The woman from Child Protective Services looked stunned, then turned towards the school social worker and asked if they had a way of reaching my father to confirm things. Since the number they had was outdated, I took out my cell phone and gave them my father's work phone number. Unfortunately, I have no idea what was said during that conversation since I was sitting out of the room during that call, but it's safe to assume my father confirmed what I'd said. Once they got off the phone with my father, the woman came out and the lady from CPS apologized to me. I told her I understood, she was just doing her job, and I went back to class. The aftermath. When confronted about it, my aunt admitted to making the call to CPS and my grandmother was furious. She made sure that my aunt did not end up getting the red SUV that she wanted. She was instead forced to take my late grandfather's 1998 Chevy Cavalier. Unfortunately, my aunt didn't get into any legal trouble for the false CPS report because it was an anonymous tip. But my father gave her a harsh warning about what would happen to her if she pulled another stunt like that again. My aunt is still super entitled and has sadly only gotten worse. Our next Reddit post is from Nathan. A couple of nights ago I was cooking for myself, which is a rare thing these days. Thanks, depression. I was making a pasta bake with a bacony tomato sauce that I wanted to try. It was going well, basically all finished. I was just waiting for the garlic bread to cook in the oven. Now, the extractor fan from my kitchen is on the wall right next to the sidewalk outside. So that's where it vents the heat and whatnot from cooking. I can also hear people's conversations through this hole, like word for word if the road is quiet. It can be funny sometimes. I'm about to check the oven when I hear a knock at my front window, and I see an angry looking dude staring at me. Like, he was standing so close to my front window that he could see me through the net curtains. I cautiously went to the door in my cooking apron with a large wooden spoon. What was I gonna do, stir him? Are you cooking? Yeah, some pasta. Can you stop? The smell is making my daughter feel ill. That's not my problem, sir. How dare you? It's making my daughter ill. Now stop it right now. Sir, I'm in my own home. I'm allowed to cook whatever I want. If the smell is making someone sick, then go away from the smell. Ugh! And the guy just stomps off. I return to the kitchen and continue cooking. When I get back to the kitchen, I can hear the dad through the extractor fan hole. He won't stop. He was very rude and he threatened me with a rolling pin. Oh, did I? A rolling pin for making pasta? Sure. The next part was a little hard to hear. He must have walked further up or down the pavement or something because I couldn't hear it at all. I think he was on the phone to his poor wife because not long after a woman came hurrying up to my window and tapped on it. Hello, my husband said you made my daughter sick. Miss, I was cooking my dinner in my kitchen. Your other half then banged on my window saying the smell made your kid sick. The mother said nothing and walked away in silence. I heard nothing from the fan hole, so I have no idea what happened. My dinner was good though, just a little dry because I was distracted. I love the mental image of this guy's daughter doubled over on the sidewalk, sick and gagging. Meanwhile, this guy just completely ignored her so he could go yell at some stranger when any normal person would just pick up his daughter and leave. If a smell is making you sick, you don't yell at the smell, you leave the smell. That was r/entitled parents, and if you like this content, check out my podcast where I publish the exact same episodes. Also, hit that subscribe button because I put out new Reddit videos every single day. Welcome to r/entitled parents, where an entitled mother gives their young daughter to a complete and total stranger. Our next Reddit post is from Painsomnia. So a couple of weeks ago, Karen, the entitled mother of this story, moved into an apartment next to my friend's. During these past couple of weeks, Karen has spoken with my friend just 2 times, with the second being yesterday, the day before this whole fiasco unfolded. This morning at about 9 a.m., while my friend was having a nice Saturday breakfast, someone started aggressively banging on her front door. When my friend answered, Karen was standing there with her 5-year-old kid who had a little backpack on. Sounding very flustered, Karen said she was sorry to have to ask this with no notice, but could my friend please watch her kid for a few hours because Karen had somewhere really important to be. Now, something you have to understand about my friend is that she can't stand kids and has no idea how to deal with them. She tenses up and gets super awkward if a kid so much as waves at her in the supermarket. My friend is also disabled. She uses a motorized wheelchair, sometimes in a walking cane for short distances or when she's just pottering around in her own home. She lives with her girlfriend who's also her carer. Her chronic illnesses involve fainting spells and a lot of brain fog, so by her own account, she is absolutely not someone who should be left in charge of a child. Karen has seen my friend using both her wheelchair and her cane, and has seen my friend's girlfriend, who was at work when all this happened, helping her in and out of their car. So my friend responded with a firm no, explaining that her medical conditions meant that the kid wouldn't be safe in her care and that she wasn't well enough to have any guests in her home anyway, let alone an unattended kid. Karen immediately flipped from pleading and simpering to hand-on-hip indignation. At this point, she accused my friend of faking her disabilities because, of course, if she can walk at all, then she obviously doesn't need a wheelchair, right? And she threatened to report my friend to welfare if my friend didn't watch the kid for her. Never mind the fact that my friend isn't even on welfare, lol. Her girlfriend has a high-paying job, and my friend works part-time hours from home most weeks. Newsflash, not all disabled people are unable to work, although, of course, getting employers to actually hire us is another matter because of ableism. So my friend basically said, I'm not on welfare and I don't appreciate being blackmailed. Find another babysitter because I am not it, and she closed her door. Karen kept banging on the door for a bit, but eventually left. About 20 minutes later, my friend heard a very faint timid tapping on her front door. She said if she hadn't been so close to it, she probably wouldn't have heard it. She sighed heavily, having kinda already guessed what was happening. She opened the door and there was the little kid, who had clearly been crying, clutching the shoulder straps of her little backpack. She said very softly, "Mommy said I could stay here today." Now, like I said, my friend can't stand kids. But even she said this kid was an absolute darling throughout this entire fiasco, and the most she ever did was cry. Because clearly her mother is a frickin' monster. Karen had just driven off and sent her kid to my friend's front door, clearly thinking that if she left my friend with no alternative, she'd just play along and babysit the kid for her anyway. Especially since my friend had literally no way of contacting Karen. Wrong. My friend had escaped abusive parents at a young age, and this kind of thing made her furious. She settled the kid in front of the TV with a drink and some snacks and called the cops. My friend told them, "Yeah, my neighbor just abandoned her 5-year-old daughter outside of her apartment and the kid showed up at my door asking to come in." When the officers arrived, my friend told them the full story, and while they were appalled, she said they weren't surprised. One said, "You'd be surprised at how not rare this kind of thing is." Which is honestly kind of the worst part of all of this. The officers took the kid with them and were really sweet with her, explaining to her that she wasn't in any trouble and she had done the right thing, and that they were going to look after her and find out where her mommy had gone. My friend found out later that the cops were able to contact the kid's father, who is currently working on divorcing Karen, and was also appalled, but not remotely surprised by what she'd done. Here's hoping that he gets full custody of that poor kid after all. all this. And then OP posted an update. This morning, my friend had another knock on our door, only it was the dad with the kid in tow. He went there to apologize for what his ex had done and so that he and his kid could thank my friend for looking after the kid and calling the police. My friend said the father seemed like a good guy who was clearly putting his kid first in all of this, which was really reassuring to hear. He told my friend that, according to his lawyer, her calling the police and handling everything the way she did basically gift-wrapped a custody battle win for him. Because what kind of court would ever grant Karen custody after the stunt that she'd pulled? His lawyer was over the moon when the dad called him. My friend also asked the dad what had been so important that Karen had abandoned her own daughter over it. Are you guys ready for this? It's so freaking cliche. It was an appointment at a nail salon. She had brought her kid with her several times previously and just demanded that the staff babysit her and refused to even acknowledge the kid during her me time. When Karen called the other day to book a last-minute appointment, because she's a Karen, the staff put their foot down and told her she could no longer bring her kid to her appointments and would be refused service if she did. The dad also said that Karen had shown up so late to the appointment that they'd refuse to see her anyway, again because she's a Karen. The dad told my friend that me time is an excuse that Karen uses to ignore her kid, basically anytime she feels like it. Do not talk to me during my me time. The dad also asked my friend if she would be okay to help with the custody battle. He said he understood that her health wasn't great and that his lawyer said that a written statement would be fine. He said it probably wasn't essential since they had the police report, but he wanted to have as much evidence on his side as possible, just to be sure. Of course, my friend agreed. Karen hasn't yet shown up at my friend's door to scream at her, so my friend is thinking that maybe dealing with the police put some actual fear of consequences into her. We shall see. I will, of course, post future updates if I receive any. Jeez, the stories today. Is anyone else starting to get the feeling that it's really, really easy to kidnap a kid? Our next Reddit post is from Nathan. For context, I'm a 23-year-old male who lives alone. I practice nudism when and where possible, and as such, I'm naked about 80% of the time that I'm at home. So this morning I woke up and went about my usual stuff. Still naked, I noticed that my kitchen bin was rather full. I had a rather large Just Eat delivery dinner the night before, and it was utter chaos in there. I took the bag out, tied it up, and threw on my bathrobe to take the bag outside to the bins by the road. The temperature was almost freezing this morning, so I didn't want to be out there for long. The bins, yet again, were full. So I moved my own bin to the pavement where they would be able to be collected easily. I threw the trash bag in the bin, and just as I was heading back up the pathway to the front door, I hear the familiar, "Excuse me?" I rolled my eyes, took a breath, and turned around. Yeah? Are you wearing anything under that robe? Why does that matter? I know my robe was done up correctly. I double knotted the tie just to make sure of it, and I wrapped it very tightly around me so it couldn't slip open anyway. Well, are you? I don't think that's any concern of yours. I'm just taking my trash out. That means you're naked under that robe. That's illegal. No, it's not. I'm covered, so it's legal. As I turn away to open my door with my keys, she suddenly lunges up the path and grabs me on the arm. Don't touch me! Get off of me! You're naked under there! That's illegal! I'm calling the police! It's damaging to children! Is it? Is wearing a bathrobe damaging to children? Whatever. If you don't let go of me, I'll report you for harassment and violence. F off, woman, and leave me alone. I've done nothing wrong here. The entitled woman emitted unintelligible grunts and screams, and it ended with police, so my guess is that she was screeching about getting me in trouble with them or something. I don't know. Well, it's now much later with no sign of police, so unless they take 13 hours to respond, I think she was either BSing or the police told her to screw off. So, OP, technically Karen wasn't wrong here, right? I mean, underneath that robe, you were naked. Just like I, too, am naked underneath of all of my clothes. I mean, I guess we're all naked underneath of our clothes, aren't we? How could a Karen be technically correct, but also so wrong? Our next Reddit post is from Future Flux. Okay, buckle up. This one's a doozy. I work for a pet and house sitting company, and I had a new client on my schedule for 3 visits a day for 2 weeks to take care of a dog. When I get to the house and go in, I see a kid inside, and I thought the parents must be running late and didn't let me know. So I said hi to the kid and said, "It's okay, don't be scared." Then I called out for the parents. The kid said that their parents were gone. I asked, "What do you mean?" The kid then said that I had to hurry up and make her breakfast and take her to school. I asked again, what do you mean? Where are your parents? She told me her parents had left to go on a trip and again told me to hurry up because she's hungry. I asked how old she is and she said 7. I asked, they left you here alone? She said yeah, her mom told her we'd be by in the morning to make her breakfast and take her to school, in the afternoon to pick her up from school and to make her a snack, and at night to make her supper. I asked where her dog was, and she said they don't have a dog. I said that when the company owner came for the client meeting and to get the house keys, she met a dog. The kid said that her mom borrowed the neighbor's dog. Oh my god. I called the company owner and told her what was going on. Of course, she was flabbergasted and came over immediately. She tried to get a hold of the kid's parents, but they weren't answering their phones, so she called Child Protective Services and explained everything when they got there. Child Protective Services took the kid, the parents' info, and left. The next day, the kid's mom called the owner and left a rambling message, screaming about how could we turn her kid into CPS and we broke the contract. So they were gonna sue her for that and also for the cost of their ruined vacation. The owner called them back and told them our agreement was to take care of a dog, not a kid, and that was illegal anyway. And also, borrowing a dog for the client meeting was deliberate misrepresentation, so good luck with the lawsuit. The owner hasn't heard from them since. I guess that our pet sitting service was cheaper than hiring someone to watch the child properly. We still can't understand how this woman thought this would actually work. The craziest thing about this story isn't the entitled mother's audacity. It's that the entitled mother basically gave the dog sitter the world's best alibi. Suppose OP was actually a terrible person. He shows up at the house and finds an unattended, alone 7-year-old girl. There are a bunch of messed up, twisted people out in that world who would see this as like a dream scenario for them. I mean, the parents literally signed a contract saying there would be a dog at the house, but not a kid. So suppose OP just grabs the girl, sticks her in a car, and just takes her off to some undisclosed location. When the parents come back and start flipping out about their kid missing, OP would just be like, what kid? I was here to take care of a dog, not a kid. See, it says so right here in this contract, no kid. So I don't know anything about your missing kid, lady, but there was no kid here when I got to your home. Man, I am glad OP called CPS because those parents don't deserve to have a child. That was r/entitled parents, and if you like this content, check out my Patreon where I publish episodes that get banned from YouTube. Also hit that subscribe button because I put out new Reddit videos every single day. Welcome to r/Am I the Butthole, where a house guest sets OP's house on fire. Am I the butthole for pressing charges when my stepson took something my daughter inherited from her mom? I'm a 47-year-old guy, and I've been with my wife for 2 years. My wife has a 21-year-old son. I have a 14-year-old daughter from my previous marriage. My late wife passed away in 2014. She left a few things for our daughter, including a gold jewelry set. My late wife was devastated that she didn't get to gift the set to her daughter on her wedding day. I keep it in my closet because it's expensive and my daughter is too young to have it. I'll hopefully give it to her on her wedding day. Last week we were sitting in the kitchen when my stepson was hesitant to ask me something. We're on good terms, but we do have our fair share of arguments. He said that his fiancée wanted to take something from my closet, that she saw the jewelry set and she liked it very much. He asked if he could borrow it so his fiancée could wear it to her cousin's wedding. I found this unacceptable, and I told his fiancée that he had no business being in the bedroom and that the jewelry wasn't even mine, it's for my daughter. He asked me if my daughter would agree to let him borrow it if he talked to her. I told him not even to bring it up again. Then he got all pissed off and said things that I don't remember. Last Saturday when he and his fiancée were at the wedding, I discovered that the jewelry set was gone. I told my wife, and we looked all over the house. I called my stepson to tell him I was calling the police because I really thought someone stole the set. He said there was no need because he borrowed the jewelry and would return it after he got back from the wedding. I yelled at him and told him to come back with the jewelry right then. I kept calling him until 12 a.m. when he told me to stop calling and that he'd bring it in the morning. I couldn't sleep that night. I felt terrible. In the morning, he showed up at 10 a.m. He didn't bring the jewelry and started saying that he forgot it. He would bring it the next day. At this point, it was clear that he had given it to his fiancée and he was just stalling. I got so mad that I told him that I'd be pressing charges if he didn't return the set today. We got into an argument, and my wife pointed out that his fiancée was the one who wanted the jewelry set, but he was the one who took it, and it's not even mine, it's my daughter's, which made it worse. Because I'm responsible for whatever happens to it. His grandparents berated me after I told them this and got mad and defended him when I said that I'd be pressing charges. He stole something, and he needs to be responsible for his actions. He didn't answer my most recent phone call, so I've given him one last chance and then it's over. I pressed charges today. They're saying that calling the police was extreme and cruel. They're all convincing me to back down. Am I the butthole for pressing charges? So first you set a very clear boundary. Then your stepson ignores your boundary and steals your jewelry. Then you give him very clear warnings to return the valuable jewelry or you'll press charges. Then your stepson refuses again to return the stolen jewelry. No, OP, you are not the butthole. You have given him every opportunity to do the right thing. Your stepson sounds like a douchebag, and your stepson's family are all super toxic. OP, you get 0 out of 5 buttholes, your stepson gets 4 out of 5 buttholes, and your stepson's family gets 3 out of 5 buttholes. You can't just steal valuable family heirlooms from a child. Am I the butthole for asking my brother's entire family to move out because my nephew set my bathroom on fire for a TikTok? I'm a 32-year-old woman. My 43-year-old brother, his wife, and their 2 kids, a 9-year-old girl and a 15-year-old boy, have been staying with me for a little over 2 weeks because they lost their jobs due to coronavirus and were evicted. 4 people is obviously a large addition, but I didn't want them to be homeless and they assured me that it was only a temporary stay. 2 days ago, my nephew set my bathroom on fire for a TikTok. From what he told me after, there's some kind of trend where you draw a shape on your mirror with hairspray and then you light it on fire, and it's supposed to go out on its own without causing any real damage. Well, my nephew's fire spread onto a nearby stack of towels and got out of control. We all had to evacuate, but luckily I live relatively close to a fire station, so the damage wasn't that bad. My guest bathroom is scorched and will need repairs, but the rest of my home is okay. I think that my brother and sister-in-law have been wildly negligent to allow this to happen, especially considering the lighter my nephew used was my brother's, meaning he must have taken it from him at some point. I'm asking them to leave within the next week because I don't want to risk something of this nature happening again. They've apologized and asked me to reconsider because it was an accident and no one was hurt in the end. They'd be homeless if I kicked them out now, and what about my niece who did nothing? I'm not going to charge them for the repairs because they flat out can't afford it, but I no longer feel safe living with them. OP, your brother's family is worried that they'll be homeless if you kick them out. What about you being homeless if your house burns down? Look, when someone comes to live at your house, there are certain rules you have to follow. I'm not exactly sure what rule number 1 is, but very, very high up in the list, maybe even on the number 1 slot, is don't burn the house down. OP, I'm giving you 0 out of 5 buttholes. I'm giving your brother 3 out of 5 buttholes, and I'm giving your nephew 4 out of 5 buttholes. Also, OP, could you at least share the TikTok? Because I'd love to see the panic on this kid's face as he realizes he's caught the house on fire. Am I the butthole for telling my estranged father that he and his wife can be grandparents to his other kids' future children? My parents divorced when I was 15 because my dad had been cheating on my mom with a coworker of hers. My younger brother was 13 and my sister was 12. I became estranged from him around that time. My siblings followed suit, my full siblings anyway. I have 2 half-siblings on my father's side who are older than me and my other siblings. They were jerks to us because we were angry that our dad hurt our mom. And they made it clear that if we didn't want our dad, they didn't want us. So ever since then, I've considered him my estranged father and not even my real dad. I'm now married and I have 2 little boys. I only see my father and his wife once every 3 years or so when there's a paternal family event of some kind. Last year there was a milestone birthday for my grandpa, and throughout the day people went to go see him. When I was leaving, my father showed up and he saw that I had kids. After that, he tracked me down on social media and started saying how he and his wife would love to be grandparents and how his wife was unable to have kids, so no biological grandkids and all that stuff. I replied once and told him that he could ask his other kids if he could be their grandparent because he wasn't welcome in my life or the life of my kids. He responded several more times, but I just ignored him. He then decided to get my great aunt involved and say that my boys deserve to have more loving grandparents in their life and that I made his wife cry and I was insensitive. My reply was that she was insensitive to sleep with a married man with 3 kids, but apparently that wasn't a big deal. And it goes beyond that to how she treated my mom at work while the affair was still happening. This lady even got fired over it because she was bullying another colleague of my mom's too. Those two are not the type of people I want around my kids. So tell me, am I the butthole for what I said? No way, OP, you get 0 out of 5 buttholes. A newborn child is basically a package deal with the parents. If you want to have a relationship with a kid, then that means you have to have a relationship with the parents. Your dad had years and years to make it up to you and try to get back in your life, but he didn't because he decided that you're not worth his time. So why should he be worth your time? The answer clearly is that he isn't. I'm giving your dad 4.5 out of 5 buttholes for being a deadbeat, cheating hypocrite. Am I the butthole for kicking my son and his wife out after they took my daughter's room? I'm a single mom of 2, Dale who's 22 and Kim who's 15. My late husband passed away when Kim was 10. It was too much because it's hard being a single mom. No one in my life has ever stood by me. Where I live, society tends to be harsh on single moms. I always felt so much stress with all the responsibilities and everyone expecting me to just give up. There were many times when I felt like a failure, and I never wanted to be seen as a failure in my kids' eyes. I want them to look up to me, learn from my experiences, and learn to stand by themselves and be strong. Kim is the apple of my eye. She went through so much. I tend to be a little overprotective of her. I once dated someone who was nice to me, but once I noticed how poorly he treated Kim, I told him to leave immediately. And I decided to focus on Kim. My son Dale and his wife are expecting a child. He's been unemployed for months, and they left their rental apartment and moved in with me and Kim temporarily. However, his wife started disrespecting Kim's privacy. She would walk into her room constantly, taking her things and ruining them. They brought boxes of baby stuff and stored them in Kim's room. I told Dale's wife to move the boxes to the storage room, but Dale made excuses that the stuff might get damaged. Dale and his wife talked about staying there a few more months. She's 8 months pregnant, till after the baby was a few months old. His wife suggested that my daughter move into my room and they take her room and turn it into a nursery. I said no, that is not up for discussion. Dale understood, but his wife didn't like it. Kim came to me saying Dale's wife is trying to convince her to give her room up to her nephew, and I told Dale's wife firmly to stop annoying Kim. Yesterday, I came home and found Dale moving Kim's stuff out of her room and replacing it with her baby stuff. Kim was in the living room waiting for me. She was crying and I was livid. I saw Kim's room. Her bed, her favorite posters, her closet, and the graphic art left to her by her dad were all moved. I confronted Dale and his wife. Dale said that it was his wife's idea and she told him that she'll work it out with